Hi and welcome to Plugin of the Week. I'm Carly and this is JC. We are streaming live from our hub here at Point Blank headquarters in East London. Today we're going to be checking out the Ampex ATR102 from Universal Audio, which is a mixing and mastering tape machine plugin based on the original machine dating back to the mid-70s. If you're looking to add some roundness, warmth and an overall analog polish to your mixes, then this is a pretty good emulator. Is that right, JC?
Absolutely. And I think the first thing we can do is to listen to it as an example.
Yeah, sure.
Let's have a quick look. So I've taken deliberately a track that I felt was a little bit harsh.
Okay.
Kind of a electro dance track, quite harsh. Let's have a listen. That is without the plugin. Mm-hmm. I've put it in the bypass mode. And I'm going to bring it in. So straight away on that example that I've just done, you can see how it's kind of taming the transient, making the top end kind of warmer, literally shaving off a little bit of the top end. And what I love about this plugin is you can even take it to the extreme and make it sound very much like a 10 years old tape, the cassette tape that has been left
Can we hear that
under the sun. Absolutely. So that's quite extreme. As you can hear now, there's absolutely hardly, all the top end is gone, really distorting in the mids, etc., etc. So yes. So what I want to do now is explain a little bit about the concept of tape and what it does, and then going with the plugin a little bit to see what it can bring to your mixes and how relevant it is. So
you were talking to me about this yesterday. It was really interesting, the kind of
okay, yeah. I mean, I've worked a lot with tape. I probably most of my career actually in the studio as a mix engineer. I've worked with tape because that's where we would print our final mixes to this actual tape machine. You know, I was thinking about it and I've used it probably from 91 to 2003.
And the original machine, is this still a staple in most major recording studios?
Yes, except that maybe there's a tendency now because of budget, less people going to studios. So I think it's only now certain artists who probably are using it. I mean, for me, what's interesting is now that we're working in a digital world, we are looking for that, how to bring a bit of that warmth and magic of the tape, you know, of analog anyway, with all the simulation of console, hardware, compressors, EQ, tape machine, etc. For me, what's interesting is back in the days working with tape has a lot of flaws. In the sense that it's not clear. It doesn't give you what goes in is not what comes out. You know, there's a coloration that comes with tape. And there are many factors about why it happens, and we will discuss some of those. But back in the days, like I was saying, we always were struggling to try to kind of like, how can we get it as clean as possible? Avoiding having the hiss, avoiding having all the artifacts of tape, you know. We were very much trying that. And nowadays that we have everything super clean in the digital world, we are trying to bring a little bit of those imperfection.
Because that sound is quite charming, isn't it? That imperfection.
It's a bit, and I think for me, the harshness I find in the digital, I'm not a big fan of the top end. The transient are what they are, you know, they're super clean. If you get a really fierce snare drum into your digital, it comes out really fierce with the transient. Analog always had a way of compressing transients, smearing them, so it was a bit softer. That means when you play it super loud, it still sounds really quite pleasing. Whereas some of the maybe modern sound, especially when it's mastered really heavily, can be a bit brutal to the ears, a bit harsh to the ear, especially played if you go to a club where the sound system is a bit not quite there, and the track has been mastered and hammered, then that's when for me it's becoming just on the borderline of bearable. So there were many things. So let's look at this tape machine. So the ATR, released in '76, was a major step up because most of the transport meant that it was a much more stable machine. The transport was better, there was no wow. you know, with the old tape machine, you can hear almost like the speed not changing, not being consistent.
Yeah.
So that really made a big difference. And that became really the go-to mastering machine for mastering studios, for recording studios. And the reason also people see it as a mastering device is because, for me, it's kind of like, in the mixing room, if you were mixing to that, obviously when you go to mastering, they need to have one, because otherwise they can't play back the mix that you've done, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think sometimes I find there's a bit of confusion about, oh, it's a mastering piece, and it's kind of like, well, no, it was, we used to mix on them, and then the mastering engineer would have one, so you could bring your tape, play it back, and he could do his job.
Yeah.
You know. And then in the digital world, I think what happened after that, some people, for the taste of it, if they didn't have access to a tape, then the mastering engineer may say, oh, let's try to put it to tape to get that sound.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to understand those two concepts.
Yeah, really important.
So one of the things you used to have to do when working with tape was to calibrate it. What I mean is that, let's say I've got 0 dB going out of my console, I have to have 0 dB going onto it and coming out 0 dB, so everything was lined up. And the way you would line them up was a bit time consuming. It would take about half an hour, a taste tone tape based with the flux, etc. It's quite complicated. But what you were trying to achieve is the best possible sound with a given tape. And obviously there's a huge number of tape. Some people may use one tape, some other people may use another. So you always had to line up your tape machine according to the tape that you were using.
Right.
All of that was super, time consuming.
Yeah.
So you don't have much of a chance to experiment. Most studio would be kind of like, our tape machine are lined up for that kind of tape. Being job done. You would put your mix and you would. So I'm going to go through those, how we used to use them. So those tape machines came in different tape width. Tape width is 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. And the general idea behind tape width is obviously the more width you have, the better it sounds. Less hiss and more dynamic.
Right.
And it's a physical thing. If you think of a very tiny, let's say I've got a big stain on the small wall, you really see it.
Yeah.
And think of it as a small wall, as a small tape. Now, you've got the same stain, but on a much bigger wall, you notice it less. And it's the same with the tape. Wider tape, if it has a little imperfection, you don't hear it as much because it doesn't take as much space out of the tape. You know, and also the tape, the faster the tape ran, the better quality you were getting as well. Less hiss, more dynamic, and again, noticing less of the kind of tape artifact. So those Ampex, when ran at their optimum setup without pushing anything, they're pretty transparent. The tape is very subtle, you hardly hear it. So the way to use it is in mix down or mastering, I would put it as my last in the chain. At mastering, I probably would follow it up with a limiter. But I tend to personally use it when I mix. And I have to say, it is my favorite plugin.
Is it?
Yeah, because
ever?
Probably. It is in terms of, because I'm a mix engineer, so for me it's really about changing the sound of my mix and getting a color. And I love the color of tape because I've worked all my life with tape. And so when I mix, it is the first plugin that I put. Because it's changing your top end, it's changing your bottom end. So I put it first, and then I set it up a certain way. And then all I do is maybe go a bit louder into it, and then you're starting to get certain effects. Or if you back off, you get a cleaner sound. That's kind of the idea. So the way I set it up, and here I'm not using it in a mix situation, I've just have few mix that have been already kind of half mastered. So I'm using it here, and I'll explain to you why I've got some gain. But here is the tape machine itself on its own, and its default setting, I'm going to use it on 30 IPS. It's 30 inch per second. That's the maximum speed you can have on the tape machine. And that's the clearer, the cleaner. Less hiss, better dynamic range, etc. On this, you change the tape width, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch. So in its default of 1 inch, at 30 IPS, it's probably going to be at its cleanest. It's fairly clean. If I bypass it here, doing very, 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 very little. It does a little bit, round off a little bit, the transient especially, but it does very little.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
Now, the sound of tape, and what I love about this, is that really depends on the tape you use and how it is calibrated. So we've discussed the tape width roughly and the speed, and we'll go through some of them. At 15 IPS, so half the speed of 30, that's a lot of people love to use it. In the studio back in the 90s, we used to put a Dolby SR because at 15 IPS you're getting a lot more hiss. So we used to put a Dolby on it that would attenuate the hiss. But what it happened at 15 IPS is something quite magical happened on the bottom end and the top end. The top end can become a lot clearer, and also the bottom end can become what we call a head bump, a boost in the bottom end a little bit. And so let's have a listen. I'm going to go half inch again, 15 IPS. Do you hear the big difference that it does as well on the top end? The top end is really changing, and the bottom end as well. And also, the more gain you're putting into at 15 IPS, you're really starting to get that tape compression. Again, natural compression from the tape. And the way to boost would go into record, but I'm going to go into that a little bit afterwards. So, what's great, back in the days in the studio, I would have the choice of 15 IPS, 30 IPS, and half inch was the default of the head. Obviously, you can't take the head off and put some new one. It takes a long time. So that was the setup I used to have. What I love about that is obviously you can go quarter inch just at the press of a button. I want to go slower speed, so 7.5. 7.5 was more the speed that you would find on kind of consumer tape recorders at home, like a Revox, for example. And that's more the Revox type of sound that you would get from 7.5 IPS, quarter inch. At lower speed, you can't have the half inch and 1 inch because they never existed, so they tend to be only quarter inch at lower speed. So that's the relationship roughly between the speed and the head width, the tape width. Now, one big thing about using tape is that there's a lot of different tape manufacturers. The 456 was manufactured by Ampex and was their classic tape. When I started in the UK, we used 456, and then 459. It's what's known as tape formula. So tape is quite complicated. There's a code. It's a formula. There's a formula, a chemical formula, and they respond differently to different levels. So the manual really includes how it should be calibrated. Each tape works better at a certain level. So 456 typically was working at +6. In the UK here, the studios I used to work, we used to work at +4, but it depends. So that's the default. But let's have a listen maybe at some different tape. So let's put a half inch again. So that's the 456 at +6. Now this one is the BSF 900. Those tape machines were more those tapes were designed to work at +7.5 or +9. What it means is they could take a lot more levels in before distorting. You hear the difference straight away just between the type of tapes. And then the GP9 used to be designed to work at +9, so I'm putting it at +9 here in the calibration, still on half inch. So straight away you can hear, and here we've got a 200, I can't remember from the manual what it is, but let's have a listen. It's really changing radically. Again, all very subtle, but once you start mixing into that, it's really affect the way, in my opinion, the way you compress, the way you EQ your mixes. That's why I put it as that now has become the first thing. And back in the days in the studio, often halfway through the mix, we would start testing a little bit how the tape machine would react, and we may have changed the calibration a little bit to adapt to the final mix. So there's a real art for working with tapes.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite involved. So what I love about that is all the possibilities that you can change tape just like that, change the calibration they're working at and the tape width just at the press of a button. It's such an advantage straight away. Now, what do we mean by calibration? For the geeks out there, I'm going to open that. And here it is. So it's all those little screws. We used to basically work with tape tone and all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm not going to go into the details of that. That's way too involved for the purpose of this review.
Yeah.
I think I've lost one side of my headphones. Yeah, it's come back. No, yes, it is now. So if you leave calibration on, the beauty of it is that it means no matter what you're doing here, you don't have to change the calibration. It's already calibrated.
Okay.
That means the level that comes in is the same as the level that comes out.
Right.
So super handy, obviously. Again, you could never have done that with the real hardware.
Yeah.
You would have had to go in there and start setting up all of those.
Yeah.
In addition, what you can do with this that you couldn't do on the original is that a tape machine, like I've explained, has a wow and flutter. It has hiss, it has hum, it has crosstalk. Crosstalk is the fact that the left-hand side, the sound from the left-hand side, bleed a little bit on the right and vice versa.
Okay.
They're not totally divided left-right.
Right.
They kind of cross a
Okay.
little bit from one track to another. But it's part again of the magic of multi-track, of tape. The wah and flutter, like I was explaining, is the fact that the tape is not consistently spinning. It kind of changes a little bit.
Can we hear what that sounds like?
Of course, and I'm gonna increase it and make a point of it. So let's have first, I think, the wah and flutter, which you can set up here. Okay. Again, it's quite subtle, but it's starting to wave a little bit. And you can totally turn it off here. It's a nice sound. Now, obviously, on the real machine, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the physics of what a tape machine is. But now you can actually play with it. So not a bad thing to have.
That's a really cool feature.
It's a cool feature. And to be honest, the Ampex was known to have a very minimal wah and flutter. That's why it was so widely used for mastering. You can hiss and hum.
Okay.
Let's see if we can push some hiss. But you hear it as well if I do it here. You're starting, it's in the background. Lately on one of the mix I've done, I've left it on and the artist was kind of like, what is that? And suddenly they realized there was all this hiss underneath. The beauty of it is back in the day with the tape, I wouldn't have been able to remove it. Here I was able to
one click
to back it off.
Yeah.
And, I still left some. I never told them, but I still left some. So
you're gonna know now.
That's a cool thing that you can add and do on top of it. Now, those Ampex used to be modified a lot, which is why it's hard to tell whether it sounds really like the real thing, because each of them were slightly different. There were about 3,000 of them made in the world. That's all.
Oh.
A studio called Matrix in London with Rob, the CEO at Point Blank, and every room had one of them. So I know that we had at least 12 out
really?
of the 3,000
wow.
for a time being, and but they were in every mixing room. Proper, good mixing room would have an ATR102, 102 definitely. So you can close that again. So so that gives you an idea of what the tape can do to you, for your music. So let's play a little bit more. So now, one of the big things about tape is the first thing you should do is just set it up at, let's say, 30 IPS or 15 IPS, depending, do you want that kind of tape compression or do you want something fairly clean but just round off a little bit?
Yeah.
I quite like 30 IPS, and both of them 15 I really like. So let's say you decide on the speed, the width of the tape and the calibration. I usually go with what the manufacturers recommend because that's what it is. However, one of the big things with tape, what I would do is once I had it ready, I would play with how much I'm going into it how much of I'm putting, level onto the tape. Now, to change the level, recording level, you can push that up, but you're kind of losing your whole calibration of 0 VU, etc. This machine is calibrated by Universal Audio at -12 dB full scale equals 0 VU. So I'm keeping it that way. The way I found a way to work with it personally that really works for me. If I want to be able to assess how much I'm doing and if I like what I'm doing, and it's the same with compression and EQ, for me it's crucial that you can compare at the same level. Because if you've got something, suddenly a lot of people put compression and it's louder because they've got a makeup gain or they make it louder on the output of the compressor. And then suddenly everybody's like, oh, it sounds much better. It's kind of like, it's hard to tell because it sounds louder. Does it sound louder or does it sound better? So for me, it's essential to compare at the same level. So the way I'm using it, I found this neat way of using it is I put a gain before and after. The gain before allows me to push into the tape machine. And here I back off by the same amount.
Oh, I see.
And I end up being at the same level, but I really can compare and really crank it up in the tape until I like what I'm hearing.
Nifty.
The more so you see now I'm really going in the tape. So I'm backing up, now I'm at the same level. And now I can truly appreciate if I like what it's doing. So as you can hear with tape machine, the more you go into them, it's starting to get a bit of grit. A lot of tape compression, rounding off on the air, a lot of harmonic distortion. All the stuff that some people who are kind of like, I don't like from tape, are definitely going to be here a lot more, obviously. And I really like that. Now let's try it at 15 IPS. You really hear, at 15 IPS driving it here, you hear the grit, you hear the tape compression, quite a lot of a head bump on the bottom end, on the low frequency, and as well on the top end a little bit. Let's have a listen again. You see it seems a bit flatter. Quite cool.
Really cool.
I think really, really cool in terms of what it brings to the sound.
Definitely.
As soon as I was able to use it, to have it, I was like, wow, this is really... That's why I put it first in my mixes, and then it's really changing the way you mix, in my opinion. And it has changed the way I compress the mix, the way I EQ the mix, because now I use that as a color, as a tonal thing. I think there's great example as well to be done for it. So obviously we can't cover the whole analog concept of working with tape. I mean, there's so many. I haven't gone into talking about the EQ that you can change, the curve, NAB, CCI, and AES, all of that. There's so much to talk about in terms of. But I just need to introduce. And for me, what I love about it is the fact that it's so detailed as the original was. It's the one that you can tweak the most among all the other simulation of tape machine. There are a lot of other simulation, and UAD, I've done a lot of them. They've got 3. They've got the Oxide, the Studer. All of them have different purposes. But this one, as a 2-track stereo master, is the one that you can tweak the most.
Does it come with any presets?
It comes with loads of presets. So for me, the starting point for anybody who's going to use it is choose your speed, choose your tape, calibrate it probably to the way it should be, play with a 1-inch, half-inch, quarter-inch, and play with how much you go into it. And that's how you should use it. And that doesn't require a huge knowledge of analog tape and calibration, because it's calibrated automatically. Just play with that, If you're unsure and you don't want too much of the tape, go for 30 hertz, 30 IPS, sorry. 456 maybe at +4, half-inch. That's kind of the standard, I would say,
Yeah.
if there's such a thing. And then just play with how much you put into it.
So do you think it's easy enough for people to use if they haven't had much experience with
Yeah,
tape?
that's what I'm saying. If you go with
Yeah.
that, with those
It
kind of
just-
setup,
yeah.
absolutely. And then all you need to do is play with how much that goes in. You can do it with the record, but like I said, I'm going to do it. So let's go a bit less. I'm going to really crank up now. 5, so I'm going to bring it 5 here. Yeah, and you see now, starting to be extreme. You hear starting to hear the distortion. You also hear the transient. They're popping out a lot more. You pay careful attention to the kick and the snare. And now they've been smashed. Obviously, it's extreme. It's a kind of extreme setting at 30 IPS. And we can take it, as we've seen before, a lot more extreme. Another good use for it is, for example, let's drag an audio track, and let's put just really briefly some drums. Maybe there's some kind of loop drum. Let's see, just a drum. Maybe something else. Let's go with clean sheet. Let's go with that, yeah. Okay, so now we've got this. Okay, I'm going to do that. I'm going to quickly do that. Remove that up. Let's focus on this drum. For example, if you wanted more extreme settings, you could, on purpose, want to have an. I think the mic is. So now I've got a breakbeat here, so I'm going to put one of those tape machine on it, an Ampex. Let's do that. It's up there, I think. Yeah. So let's have it here, but let's go really lo-fi. So at 3.75, we can play with different type of tape. Doesn't matter. Gonna really increase you hear the movement of the pitch. So that's pretty cool.
Sounds really cool.
What else could we do? I mean, after that, if you really wanted to play with your calibration here, you could I'm taking the top end right down. Yeah. I could also over bias it. Do you hear, if you get the bias right, the top end, and then starting to go again? So you can, get a wrong bias just on purpose to get a bit of a sound into it. And let's say if we wanted to quickly again, let's crank it up a little bit into it. Or actually, you can even crank it up from here. I can crank it up. I think I preferred what happened here, actually. So now, that's with. See how you're getting that kind of really lo-fi
I love it.
cassette. But so I think that having the possibility to go that lo-fi, which those machines were not designed for, and I've personally never used them that way. If I wanted to use lo-fi, I would put it to a cassette or something, or even a dictaphone. But the fact that you can do that, that's absolutely brilliant in my opinion. I mean, for drums, it can be for anything, for vocals, for bass. Try it. Obviously by any means. And I think that can really work for the electronic music producer as well. Finally, one thing that is cool as well with tape that we could do was tape delay. And this device has the tape delay function that you can use. So what I've done is I've set up on this track very quickly on the vocal, just so we could hear it. So I'm going to bypass it first.
To be a dancer, no amount of money on a check can make a stop was an answer. A 9 to 5 was cancer, more deadly than a lancer. Never thought she had kissing and Donna Cupid Prancer.
So now I'm sending it onto here, and you see there's a tape delay function that I've activated. I've put it onto 100% wet because I'm using a sand.
To be a dancer.
So it's a really lush delay in my opinion. You know, it's that kind of tape delay that other manufacturers are trying to simulate to get again an analog, not a digital clean delay. So the beauty of it is if you start putting a lot of Flutter on it and even go super lo-fi like we've done before, I'm going 3.5, I'm hammering the entering level here.
To be a dancer, no amount of money on a check.
The quality of the delay, really grungy, really. On top of it, if you go back in the days of dub, often they would use tape delay to do dubs, not a normal delay, but tape delays. And what you would do is get it to send it to its own signal. So I'm sending now the delay back into itself to create what we call feedback. And you can, that's when you can start doing some.
To be a dancer. No amount of money on a check can make a stop was an answer. A 9 to 5 was cancer, more deadly than a lancer. Never thought she had kissing and Donna Cupid Prancer. Used to have a dancer's body or the bill, but she came to the conclusion how we gonna pay the bills. Not the worry bonds.
All that kind of stuff.
Have lots of fun with that.
So you can have lots of great fun with it, you know. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's the most interesting plugin simulation in terms of simulating your tape. I mean, it has become my favorite UAD plugins. I mean, I've got others. All the classic plate and spring reverbs are absolutely amazing, in my opinion, what they've done with it. But that is now my
number one.
Well, in the sense that it's the first plugin that I load on the mix. Once I've organized all my mix, the first one I put before I do anything is that has become the ATR102.
Cool. Thank you very much. You're a wealth of knowledge.
Oh, no, pleasure. I hope it has been useful for people, and you know, try it by any means. If you have a UAD and you haven't gone into it, there's a 14 days demo. Try it out.
Yeah, just head to the Universal Audio website.
And,
it's actually on sale at the moment. I think you can grab a copy for 150 quid instead of 260.
Yeah, so well worth it, definitely. I mean, if you try the demo, you end up buying it very much.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
No, thank you, Cody.
And if you guys or girls out there would like to learn more about mixing, mastering, or sound engineering, just head to pointblankmusicschool.com where you can check out a whole range of our courses. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back very soon with another plugin of the week.